Okay, hello, good afternoon.
Good
Good afternoon,
afternoon.
everyone. Can you hear
Hello.
me?
Hello.
Yes, we
Hello,
can hear
yes,
you.
we can.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Please, can you say something? I can't hear you guys actually.
I can hear you just fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Uh, the sound I'm hearing is quite faint actually. But if you are hearing me, that's fine. But I also want to hear you because so that when we have discussion, I can also be part of it. Okay. Last week I said I was going to send I was most probably going to send us possibly a link to the recorded session, but I don't know what happened. I am certain on the fact that I was recording last week, but one way or the other, Zoom did not send me the link to the recording. So I'm still trying to find out the technical stuff around that, why I did not receive the recording. But I'm recording now. I'm hopeful that this time I will possibly get the recording. For the benefit of those that may want to want to have it at the end of the session. But the session is being recorded now, and so we'll see where we go from there. I suppose you can see my screen, right? I'm sharing my screen now. Okay. Okay. Um, okay. As much as possible, I will just kickstart and hope that others will join us if there's anybody that is not here now. Um, um, as much as possible, we will not stay too long today. So today we want to look at authority, sovereignty, states, and non-state actors. We are still discussing the key terms we use when we discuss geopolitics. Last week we had some interesting discussion, and before we go into what is authority and discuss around um, sovereignty and the likes. Sorry, a minute. I think I need to close some of my browsers. Okay. So before we go straight into today's conversation on authority, sovereignty, state and non-state actors, I will want to ask from last week's teaching, what's a summary of what we got from last week. Can I have somebody volunteer to tell us what you were able to pick from last week's teaching, a summary of it, anything whatsoever. We had a whole lot of conversation and on different themes. What stood out for you as a person in last week's teaching? And then maybe you want to share with us in the class.
That there are a lot of different arts of power.
Okay.
I didn't really think about it before.
I really need to work on my own audio. I think it's from my side. Okay, can you say that again?
The different kinds of power.
Yes, this is better now. I think it was my audio. Yes, different types of power. Okay. So what did you pick from that?
That there are so many different kinds. I didn't really think about it before.
Okay. Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, we talked about the distribution of the power.
Okay. How power is being distributed. Yes. Any other points? Distribution of power, yes. Let's play around these thoughts. What else came to you? What else stood out for you guys last week?
The polarities.
Polarities.
I tried to think about which one is best, but I couldn't decide because every kind leads to chaos or suppression of some kind.
Okay, so there's a saying that when you are faced with two evils, what do? You pick the lesser evil, right? So which is the lesser evil from the discourse on polarity? So let's pick the class up from there. I think we ended with the discourse on polarity, right? So which is the lesser evil? There's this saying that says when you are faced between the devil and the deep blue sea, which will you pick? The devil or the deep blue sea? Let me put it into context. I don't know if you've had that before. Have you had that before? So what will you pick between the devil and the deep blue sea?
I would pick the devil because I know what's coming for me. Because I know the devil, but I don't know the deep blue sea. It could be anything.
Okay, that's beautiful. You rather pick the devil. So yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. Huh?
I mean, it depends if you're a religious person or not.
Okay.
Because a religious person would pick the sea and not the devil.
Okay, that's interesting. So you rather just go to meet him. If you're a religious person, most probably you believe in the idea of a God, right? So
yeah, because
you
it's the
rather die
counterpart.
Okay, both God and the devil, right? Mm-hmm. So you rather die and go to heaven than face the devil, right?
Yeah, if it's a religious person, yeah.
Yeah. That's a point too. I also agree with that. At this point, I'm just a neutral empire. I guess I'll have to agree with everything at this point, right? Oh, yeah. If you are a religious person, yes, but you also will remember, even as a religious person, that you need to stay on earth to win souls, quote and unquote, more for God. So you need to be alive for you to be able to work for God. Dead people don't work for God. I hope you know. Right?
Yeah.
So you need to be alive to work for God. And apparently, if you are going to be picking the devil in this instance, I think you should pick the devil, even if you are religious. If you are picking the devil in this instance, then you know that you live to fight another day. Because only people that are alive that can fight, right? So in this instance, yes, it's relative, but you will need to pick the lesser evil. If you feel the deep blue sea is the lesser evil for you, you pick that. And if you feel the devil is the lesser evil, you pick that. So in the discourse on polarity, we need to pick the lesser evil. So which will be the lesser evil? Should we have a situation, if you remember in our discussion last week, we said polarity is the distribution of power in the world system. How power is distributed, the structure of power within the world system is polarity. And we said that prior to the First and Second World War, we have what was referred to as a multipolar system. And we said a multipolar system is a situation whereby you have multiple powerhouses. You have more than 2 countries that were powerful countries in the world, right? And the implication of that, for instance, when we look at it contemporarily now, is that imagine a situation whereby you're familiar with the nuclear weapons. You know what a nuclear weapon can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Now, imagine a situation whereby we have 10 people that have control to nuclear weapons. How do you manage them? You get the idea? That's the premise of polarity now. You have 10 powerful people, meaning that we have 10 people that have control of nuclear weapons. And each one of them can decide to do whatever at any time with their nuclear weapons, right? For instance, now, if you're familiar with the discourse around the world now, you have the fact that people are scared of North Korea. Why are people scared of North Korea? Because there's a presupposition that North Korea have access to nuclear weapons, right? People are scared of Iran, Israel, India, Pakistan, right? These people have access to nuclear weapons. The United States, Russia, China, they have access to nuclear weapons. So you can say that in this instance, that is a multipolar system, whereby there are different centers to power. It can be triggered by anybody at any time. That's the premise of a multipolar system, right? Many powers having access, many actors having access to power. And then we now said that we said historically, before the First and Second World War, we had that situation, especially in Europe. You know, before now, Europe was the center of the world itself. So when we talk about world wars, we are practically talking about the wars in Europe, right? And every part of the world were involved in the wars in Europe. Just the way we were all involved, we are presently involved in the elections in the United States, right? The reason why we are involved in the elections in the United States is because presently now, the United States is the world power. But the world power was centered in Europe at that point, whereby for that reason we refer to it as world wars, right? But in the true sense of it, it was actually wars that were happening in Europe. Now, before the First and Second World War, we have superpowers, right? You have Italy as a powerhouse, you have Germany as a powerhouse, you have France as a powerhouse, you have Russia as a powerhouse, you have the United Kingdom as a powerhouse. So that was what we had before the First and Second World War. And then after the First and Second World War, we moved to whereby we have 2 powerhouses. 2 countries were the most powerful countries in the world, right? We have the United States as a powerful country in the world, and then we have the USSR as another powerhouse in the world. So you see, if you bring again the analogy of nuclear weapons, at that point, you have a situation whereby you have just 2 countries that have access to nuclear weapons. So which would you prefer? A situation whereby you have 10 countries having access to nuclear weapons. We are only using nuclear weapon as an example, right? Nuclear weapon to signify the power of the world, right? But please take note that when we talk about power in world power, it moves beyond nuclear weapons alone. We talk about military strength, yes, but we also talk about economic strength, right? It's military and as well as economy. But this time we're just using nuclear weapons just to understand the premise of polarity, right? Now you have a situation whereby 2 countries can decide on have control of nuclear weapons. That's why we have bipolar system. 2 countries as the powerhouse of the world. And then we said that historically, the bipolar system was in operation after the Second World War, what was referred to popularly as the Cold War. I suppose you've heard that before, the Cold War, right? So in the Cold War period, it was the USA and the USSR. And you see, it was both economic and political, right? Economic and military power. Economic side is where we discuss the issue about communism and capitalism, right? I suppose you are familiar with that term.
Yes.
Communism and capitalism. Are you? Do you guys have an idea of what that is? What is communism? As much as possible, I just don't want to just be bringing about terms and then I'm just speaking and possibly I'm the only one understanding myself. What is communism? Any idea?
The ideology of the USSR that everything should be split evenly.
Okay. Yes, everything should be spread evenly. Yes, that's one aspect of it. And the basic idea is that everything is controlled by the states, right? Under communism, the idea is that everything is controlled by what? By the states. And we said that communism is the highest state of socialism, right? Everything is controlled by the state. It is the highest stage of socialism, right? And the principle there is that it is to all according to your capability. To all according to your capability, and you take according to your needs. So you get things according to your needs, but you work according to your capability. That's the general principle under communism. And then we have the premises of capitalism. And then what is capitalism? Every day we talk about that this country is capitalist or you are capitalist. What do we mean by capitalism? Any idea?
I would say it means the opposite, so that everything can be owned by a private person or by a company aiming to make profit.
Very perfect, very correct. Capitalism is just the idea of private ownership, right? Capitalism is the idea of what? Private ownership. But please get this. Communism is not the opposite of capitalism, but rather socialism is the opposite of capitalism. Can I make that clearer? Right? Can I say that again? Socialism is the opposite of capitalism. Communism is the highest state of capitalism. How do we put it? Let's say that socialism is the baby, right? Communism is the mature adult. Does that make sense? We say socialism is what? Is the baby. Communism is the mature adults of that baby. Socialism is the economic and political system whereby means of production and distribution, ownership is largely controlled by the state. Mark that word, largely, mostly controlled by the state. That is to say that a larger portion of what is available is controlled by the state, but not all portion, right? There's still some element of individual ownership. That is what we say socialism is. But under communism, it becomes what? Total ownership of means of production by the state. Are we together? Why capitalism is what? Individual ownership of means of production and distribution, right? Individual ownership. And it preached liberalism, individualism. People need to just be on their own, and everybody needs to survive. Everybody needs to survive on its own. So you see, during the Cold War, the reason why it was referred to as Cold War II was because it was a war of ideas. it was a fight between communism and capitalism. While the USSR won the war to operate a communist system, the United States and its allies won the war to operate a capitalist system. So it operates under these premises. So we had a Cold War at that point, right? And then at the collapse of USSR in 1989, under the leadership of Gorbachev, we now had a unipolar system. And a unipolar system is what? A system whereby we have just a single authority. So using nuclear weapon, which would you prefer? A situation whereby we have one person in control of the nuclear weapon. The disadvantage of that is that the person decides what happens in the world, right? Or do you want a situation whereby two people are in control, so that way they can balance themselves, they can checkmate themselves, right? Or we want a situation whereby about 10 people are in control, and that way nobody's really in control, and everybody can balance itself. So it is a dilemma we find ourselves in the world, right? Each has its obvious disadvantage, right? If you have a unipolar system of one person having control, that is going to be, we are all going to be, quote and unquote, slaves to that particular rulership, right? Like we explained last week, if I'm the only one in control in this class, I can decide to end the class anytime. I can decide to extend the class anytime. That has a disadvantage, right? And then you have a situation whereby you just have two people in control. It also has its own disadvantage. And then when you have multiple people, a situation whereby a whole lot of people are in control, it also has its disadvantage. But the question again, I still want to ask, which do you think is ideal? Which is ideal?
After talking about it, I would say the bipolar system, because like you said, they're balancing each other out. If there are a lot of people, everybody can have a trigger finger, so to say, and do something with what is affecting other people.
Okay. Any other idea? Which do you think is ideal? Anybody want to jump in?
I agree with that. I also think the bipolar system would be the most ideal. I mean, like we said, every system has its upsides and downsides, but I think the bipolar would be the most ideal.
That's like we said, all these things are relative, right? But most definitely, I also agree with you. Though when you read up on most of these things, different people have different notion on what is ideal, right? Some people will tell you that the multipolar system is ideal on the premises of democracy. So everybody have different power. But the disadvantages of that is, an obvious disadvantage is when you have trigger happy people, they can just end the world at any point, right? And then for the unipolar system, when you have that just one person is in control, that is also not very ideal, because that's an authoritarian system whereby only that person decide on what happens. So yeah, I agree with you. I will also agree with you, though not everybody will agree with us, that the bipolar system is most ideal, whereby one checkmates the other, right? And with that, I will possibly ask us to please read up on what we refer to as balance of power. And we'll be playing around that, balance of power. Balance of power. I think I have a video here on balance of power. And let's quickly play the video on balance of power, and then we'll pick it up on okay, I'm just going to share I'm going to share my screen on the video on balance of power, and then let me try and share my screen. So I'm going to stop this just for a while, and then share the screen, this instead. Share. Okay.
Now, as I said earlier, balance of power can be simply described as a theory of state behavior. And what that really means is that states act to preserve a balance, or if you like, equilibrium of power in the system. So what I thought I'd do is simply draw an international system here for you. And I'm going to populate it with 5 states. And this is going to assume that all of these states, A, B, C, D, and E, are all roughly equivalent in power, hence their approximate identical size. And the whole idea of this balance of power behavior is that states act to preserve a balance of power in the system to prevent any one of these states from dominating all the others. In other words, if it looks like any of these countries is growing in power to the extent that it could dominate the entire system, maybe even conquer all the other states in the system, these states, these other states, will act to balance that power in an effort to achieve an equilibrium in the system. Now, balancing can be achieved in one of 2 different ways. The first way states can balance against a growing power is by increasing their own power. So let's use an example. Let's say state A, for whatever reason, experiences a growth in power, perhaps a combination of economic and political reasons. State A's power in the system is enhanced. Now, according to the theory of balance of power, these other states are going to be nervous about that, and they're going to want to take measures to ensure that they balance against this growth in power by state A, because they don't want to see state A grow to the extent that is capable of dominating the system, or maybe even conquering all the other states in the system. So they're going to be balancing in one of 2 different ways, and the first way is by increasing their own power. So let's say state D looks at state A, and the government of state D says, we see that state A has increased its power. We want to balance that power to make sure that state A doesn't dominate the system. And so state D can try to increase their own power. And that might involve increasing their military capacity or so on. And the whole idea then, of course, is that they have achieved an equilibrium or a balance between state A and themselves. But not all countries are capable of increasing their power that easily. There may be resource constraints and monetary constraints and so on. And so the second way to balance power is through alliances. And in this case, state B and state C may look at the growth in power by state A and think to themselves, we need to balance against that growth in power, but we really don't have the potential to increase our own power, so we are going to form an alliance. And this idea then of forming an alliance means that states B and C are combining their efforts in order to balance the growing power of state A. And so either through increasing their own power or by forming alliances, states engage in this type of balance of power behavior, and therefore the balance of power or equilibrium in the system is maintained. State A is no longer in a position where it could perhaps come to dominate the system. Now, preserving the balance of power could mean a long period of peace. For example, if this system that we have here is in equilibrium and stays that way, there might very well be no war in the system. But sometimes, preserving the balance of power does require war. So for example, let's say State A decides to attack State E, for whatever reason. Now in this case, countries B, C, and D are going to be very worried, because if State A conquers State E, it will take the economic power, the resources, the population, and so on of that state and add it to its own, thus vastly increasing its own power. And states B, C, and D are going to want to prevent that. And they'll prevent it by going to war to support State E against State A. In this case, balance of power behavior actually leads to war, because war becomes necessary to restore or maintain an equilibrium or balance in the system. Now, obviously, this is all very dynamic, very fluid, and the relative power of states in the system is in constant flux. It's changing all the time. And so this requires constant adjustment, states increasing their own power or engaging in alliances. And all of this behavior can change over time. Alliances can shift. Today, B and C are in an alliance, but maybe in the future, C and D would form an alliance. And all of that will be determined by who is considered more threatening to the system, and how the system's polarity or distribution of power is maintained. The whole idea of this, of course, realists say, captures the entire history of international relations. The history of the rise and decline of state power, the history of shifting alliances, and the whole idea is all of this originates with a basic theory that states are engaging in policies to achieve a balance of power or an equilibrium amongst them in the system to ensure that that system cannot be dominated by one actor. Okay.
Okay. So that's it. I hope we got that. Okay. So that's the discourse on balance of power, and I suppose you can relate that to the discourse on power and the discourse on polarity. Can you? I hope you guys are hearing me.
Yes.
I said, can you relate that to the discourse on power and polarity, just the way we just discussed just now? Does it make sense for you guys? Is it making any sense?
I think so.
Okay. So basically, that discourse, what you just saw now, is a continuation. It's in constant flow within the international system. The discourse on balance of power is in constant flow in the international system, and that's the realist perspective of international system. When we come to discuss the theory of international relations, I think that will be next week or upper week. I think in our week, yeah, I think it should be next week or thereabouts. We'll discuss the theories of international geopolitics, theories of international relations and the likes. You understand? We will still talk more on the realist perspective and on and on. But the system of the world is in that constant flow. And there's a shift in the house, the powerhouse of the world. There's a constant shift. At a point, it was in Europe. At the point, there was a time in which, for instance, Germany was a growing powerhouse. At the point, it was the United Kingdom that was a growing powerhouse. At a point, it was Greece, Rome, that was the growing powerhouse. Now we have the United States as the growing powerhouse. Now we are also having China coming up as a growing powerhouse. So you see, these things play around in the world as it is, but we still continue on the discourse on power. Like I said, the whole conversation on politics and international relations is all around the discourse on power. It's all around the discourse on politics. And we said power is the currency of politics, and it's also the currency of international relations as it is. So let's continue. The discourse we are having today, like I said, is on what? Authority, sovereignty, state and non-state actor. So when we talk about authority in simple terms is legitimate power. Let me put it that way. Authority in simple terms, forget about the whole jargons you are seeing on your screen now. Authority in simple terms is what? Legitimate power. It is still power. But this time it is power that is clothed. Power is just naked, right? Authority implies a power that is clothed in the premises of legitimacy. Or we say power that is according to the law. That is what it is. Power according to the law. Or we say authority is power that is accepted by all. I'm just giving you a summary of what authority is. So it is a kind of power that is recognized by all. For instance, in this class now, I don't have the power I am enjoying in this class now is based on authority. And why is it authority? Because it is recognized by us. For instance, I can say you talk, you don't talk, you come to class, you don't come to class. You do this and you don't, and you will do them willingly or you will do them grudgingly. But the most important is that you will have done that particular thing I'm asking you to do. Why? Because my power is recognized. But if I get to meet you on the streets, now, maybe within the university or anywhere now, and I tell you, do this particular thing, you are not going to do it. Not because I am still not the same person, but because at that point, my power is not recognized by you. You just make jest of me or possibly just laugh, and then you just move away because it's not recognized. So we said authority is the power that is accepted within the particular society or accepted by others within the particular society. So it's accepting the superiority of others within the particular society. So basically that's the discourse on authority. And like I said, authority is closely linked to legitimacy. Legitimacy is the acceptance of rule according to the law, according to what is seen as rights. And and last week when we were discussing the premise of politics, I said politics happens everywhere, in your room, with yourself, among your family members, your siblings, in your society, among your friends. There's politics and on and on. Among your friends, for instance, there's somebody that when he or she says something, everybody accepts. So you see that person enjoys a particular level or a particular degree of authority in the society. So mathematically, we say power and legitimacy equals authority. Power plus legitimacy equals authority. So basically that's the idea when we discuss authority, right? And then there are three types of authority. We have the traditional authority, we have the legal rational authority, and we have the charismatic authority. These are the types of authority which you have: traditional, legal rational, and charismatic. I know that for most of us now here, you are going to be looking at the picture to your right, the right side of your screen, of the huge guy there, the giants with the whole traditional regalia, the African regalia as it is. That's a king in Congo. a traditional ruler in Congo. But when we say traditional, tradition is just the way of life of the people, right? It's custom. Custom is the way of life of the people, and every society has its custom and its tradition. In Africa, you have a traditional head, the king dressed in this premise like this, and I consciously wanted to bring in an African touch to the class, and that is why we have what we have here. In Europe, the dressings of our royalty is most probably different, or is definitely different. You have different notion on that. But please take notes. When we talk about traditional authority, we are not necessarily talking about just the authority of our kings and our queens and our royal heads. We are talking about the authority of different levels, actually. We are talking about authorities that are recognized by our custom and our traditions. The custom and traditions that are accepted in that particular society. For instance, it is naturally expected that a father and a mother have some level of authority on their children, right? They have some level of power over their children, at least to a particular age. They get to a particular age before they start deciding on what they do for themselves. When we now start referring to them as legal adults, even the law recognizes that. So for instance, the first authority your parents had on you, right, is that they agree to give birth to you, because they might have decided for themselves to possibly terminate the pregnancy at fetus level, but they allow the child to grow and then they give birth to the child. That's the first authority the father or the mother have on the child. And then growing up, the father and the mother, or whatever the case may be, the parents had those authority on the child in the sense that they decide on their affairs, they decide on what happens for that child. And the child has to accept that particular authority at least for some time. So that's a traditional, that's traditional authority. The kind of authority siblings also have on themselves. Possibly maybe your older sibling have a particular authority on you, can decide on some affairs in which you are doing. That is referred to as what? As traditional authority. So basically that's the idea when we discuss traditional authority. It is authority that, or it is the kind of power that is supported by the customs and tradition of the society. It's supported by the power that is supported by our way of life, basically. So that's the discourse when we discuss traditional authority. And then the next one is to discuss legal rational. Legal is what legal rational. Okay. Okay, let's just discuss the second as I have them here. The charismatic authority. When we talk about charismatic authority, what does it mean to say you have charisma? Have you heard the word before, charisma? Anybody? When we say somebody has charisma, not charismatic authority now, just charisma.
Maybe that you have a strong personality, kind of.
Strong personality, yeah, strong personality. The person that is popular, right? A popular person, like most musicians, right? Are we together?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have strong followership based on your, and then when you have that kind of personality, we say you have charisma, right? And presently you can pick up on most of these musicians. I suppose you know Michael Jackson, right? The late Michael Jackson. I'm not a music person when it comes to these current musicians, but at least I know the old ones, right? I suppose we all know Michael Jackson, right? Michael Jackson is a popular person everywhere, right? We can say somebody like that has charisma. And if you're a sports fan, for instance, if you're a sports fan, you should be in Germany. You should be familiar with there's what's this guy now? He used to be in the national team now. What's his name? Is it Michael? Is it Michael Barak or something? Remind me.
Yeah, that's right.
Michael Barak, right?
Yeah.
Aha. So somebody like that now is a popular person, right? And then you talk about maybe the current ones now, and the people like say Ronaldo, people like Messi, people like all these guys, right? These are popular guys. They have some level of charisma that they carry. So when we talk about this, and then when you look at all that stuff, you talk about people like the pictures you have here, the pictures you have on the screen now. The guy on glasses. Who is the guy on glasses?
Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay, and the guy smiling.
Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela. The guy with the mic.
Martin Luther King.
Okay, the guy with the mic, Martin Luther King. And the one with the mic and closing his eye.
No clue.
Huh?
No clue.
No clue. Okay, that's Lucky Dube. That's Lucky Dube. So apparently, what I just tried to do here is to bring out different people that have charisma. If I want to use a current pictures, I'll be using people like the example we just gave now, the Michael Owens, the Ronaldo, and the Michael Jackson, and the Jay-Z's and the likes of the world now. These are charismatic people. Now, these people, as a result of their charisma, enjoy some certain kind of authority. They can influence our behavior. Remember, we say power is what? The ability to conform to influence behavior, right? We say that is what power is, the ability to influence behavior, the ability to make people do what they will not necessarily do. That's what power is. So when you have people that are not they are not your parents, right? They are not your parents. They are not royalty. They are not kings and queens. So they don't enjoy traditional authorities. And they are not in the position of power. They are not in political offices. They are not politicians, or better still, they may be politicians, but they are not in political office. But they enjoy certain level of authority. We say that is what? Charismatic authority. So we say charismatic authority is the kind of authority enjoyed by people that have charisma. The authority that's the ability of certain persons to conform the obedience of others based on their strong personality. So that's charismatic authority, right? And we have examples. I gave examples here. We talk about people like Churchill, right? Hitler was a charismatic leader. Stalin was a charismatic leader. Roosevelt was a charismatic leader. They enjoy some level of charisma, right? People are ready to die for them. People are ready to give their lives for this set of people. So we say these people are what they want. They enjoy charismatic authority. And then another one is the third type of authority is the legal rational authority. Legal rational authority. And legal rational authority, as the word implies, legal. I suppose you understand what it implies, what it means when we say something is legal, right? Are we together?
Yes.
Why still have a class?
What was that?
I said, I hope you understand what it means when we say something is legal.
Yeah.
What does that imply?
That it's according to the law.
According to the law, it's constitutional, right?
Yeah.
So legal rational authority is the kind of authority that is actually backed by the law, right? And
Yes.
these are the authority that is enjoyed by our political office holders, right? Our prime ministers, our presidents, and the likes, right? So this is the kind of authority that is enjoyed by these people. those people that are in the position of power, those people that are in a position whereby that is recognized by the law. So the kind of authority in which they exhibit legal rational authority. The kind of authority in which you can also say the authority in which a lecturer enjoys in class is legal rational. It is according to which law? The law of the university, right? Are we together? So the authority enjoined by this set of people are referred to as legal rational authority. It is based on the rules and regulation and not based on any specific qualities of an individual. So it is possible that your leader, your legal rational leader, for instance, may not be popular, may not have a strong personality, but you just have to respect those things they have to say because they are what? They are saying it, because they are backed by the law. They have the instrument of coercion in their with them. So we just respect them for the sake of respecting them. So that is what the legal rational authority. So yeah, so that's that when we discuss authority. So we say first we have the traditional authority, second we have the charismatic authority, and we have what? The legal rational authority. So that's that on authority. Any question on authority? Anything? Or can we just proceed?
No question at the moment.
Okay, great. Okay, so when we talk about sovereignty, when we talk about sovereignty, what does that imply? Have you heard the word sovereignty before?
Yes.
Okay, so what is sovereignty?
The right to decide over oneself.
Right to decide over oneself, right? Okay. That's part of it, but there's something missing from that. There's something fundamentally missing from that definition. What you just said now is what sovereignty is. Any addition, guys? Any addition? It says sovereignty is the right to decide over oneself, but something is missing in that definition. What is that?
The power.
Yes, when you have the right to decide over yourself, you have the power, but something is still missing. Okay, anyone? The right to decide over oneself without the interference of anybody. Are we together? Without the control or interference of any. That is what sovereignty is. You have the right to decide without the interference of another. Are we together? Right? Sovereignty is the right, the absolute and unlimited power in which an entity or an actor or a society has without the interference of another, right? That is what we refer to as sovereignty. And when we discuss sovereignty, it emerged out of the Peace of Westphalia after the European War in 1648. And the decision was that, okay, each state should have the right to decide its own affairs without the interference of anybody from outside or from inside the particular state. So basically that was a decision on sovereignty. We say sovereignty is the capacity of a state to decide its own affairs without the interference of an external or internal body. Are we together? So basically that's the definition of sovereignty. And Haywood in 2013 said sovereignty is what? The principle of absolute and unlimited power. You decide your stuff. Nobody stops you. You don't report to anybody. And from the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, the argument is that every state now enjoys sovereignty. And then in most cases, when we discuss that, and maybe when we discuss, let me not jump myself. When we go to the discuss on states, we'll discuss more on that. So we said that is sovereignty. And then we have types of sovereignty again. We have the legal sovereignty, we have political sovereignty, we have internal as well as external sovereignty. Legal sovereignty, as the word implies, is legal authority. The legal authority in which a state enjoys the right to demand compliance from its citizens, from people within its territory. And then we have political sovereignty, right? Political power, the ability to command that, command compliance. While legal sovereignty is the right to demand compliance, political sovereignty is what? The ability to command that particular compliance. So one is demanding, the other one is what? Enforcing. It is within your jurisdiction as a state to demand compliance within that particular state. And then we have what we refer to as internal sovereignty. That's the power of the state within its territory, right? The power of the state within its territory. And then we'll talk about external sovereignty. We're talking about the relationship of the state with other states. The relationship of the states with other actors within the international system. The ability of the state to decide its affairs even within the international system. The ability to engage into relationship with others. The ability to enter into relationship and the ability to carry out one decision or the other within itself. So basically that's the discourse when we talk about sovereignty. It's not a big stuff, it's just there. And summarily we said it's the rights to govern, full rights to govern, full power to govern without interference, without any form of interference. So that's that. And then we said in the international system, the international system has what we refer to as both states and non-state actors. We have states and non-state actors. By the time I explain what a state actor is, the assumption is that non-state actors will be those actors that do not have the attributes of a state. So when we say the state, what is a state? Let's start with that. What is a state? Any idea?
State is a government or country run by a political system.
A government or a country run by a political system.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Please keep this definition because we'll come back to it. A government or a country run by a political system. Yes? Let me hear from others. Some people have been silent since, so I guess I will start calling names now. What is your own notion of a state? Any volunteer?
I would say it's a country.
A country? Yes, a state is a country. So I will ask you, I will ask, a state is a country. So what is a country? Anyone again? We are getting somewhere now. We say a state is a country. And we said a state and a country is a political system. What is it? Is it Dennis that just spoke now?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's you spoke before Marcel. What do you define a state is again? A state is what did you say a state is again?
A state is a country led by a political party or a government.
Okay, I just want to remember. I want that to sink in, so because that's I want to bring that up as an example. Okay, so quickly let's just move on. A state is a country, and we said it's a country run by a political system and all that. I will come back to this definition, like I said, when we want to explain what a nation is. Because, for instance, I will ask the question we will ask when we discuss a state is that what is the difference between the UK and Scotland? Are we together? Why is Scotland not referred to as a state or a country? Or better still, why is Palestine not referred to as a state? So we get to that. Let's not rush ourselves, but just think about it. Just be thinking around this statement I make now. That Why is Scotland not a state? And we refer to as the United Kingdom as a state. Are we together? So let's continue. So when we talk about a state, we said it implies a collection of institutions, territorial units, a philosophical idea, and an instrument of coercion. These are some of the things that comes up when we discuss a state. But basically, when we discuss a state or when we discuss a country, there are four perspectives that comes to play. Ideally, when I want to discuss this, I don't want to bore us with a whole lot of discourse. We start with a different notion of different theories of states, of how a state emerge and how we want to define state. Some people talk about the divine rights of kings. Some people different notions, but we will not bore ourselves with that. It's not within the premise of this of this course. But these are interesting things that you may want to read about. You may want to go and read about the origin of states or theories on the origin of states, and then you get different things about that. But for the sake of this class, quickly, we'll just discuss these four perspectives. We first have the idealist approach to the states, the idealist approach to the states. And then we have the functionalist approach to a state, we have the organizational approach, and then we also have the international approach. So when we talk about the idealist approach to the states, they say there are three components of social existence. For the idealists, they believe that we have the family, we have the civil society, and we have the state. So for the idealists, they believe that the state is one of the components of social existence. And in that discourse of the state as a component of social existence, you'll be talking about the fact that we'll be talking about social contracts, for instance. We're talking about the social contract theory, but I will not bore you on those theories. But just please get this. The idealists believe that there are three components of social existence. We have the family, that's the first setting of social existence, and then you have the civil society as another setting of social existence, and the state as the third component of social existence. And then the functionalist sees the state from the premise of function. For it, they believe that the state is just an umpire for the maintenance of social order. The state is what? An umpire for the maintenance of social order. That's what the state is. That's what the functionalist approach. And then we have the organizational approach, which sees the state as an apparatus of government. That is where Dennis' definition also comes to play on the state. We're going to define what a state is, though. So he said, for the organizational approach, they see the state as the apparatus of government, right? In the broadest sense. While from the international approach, the state is seen as an actor, is seen as a unit within the international system. The state is seen as the basic unit of international politics. So these are the perspectives that we have to a state. The idealists, they believe that the state is a social component, is one of the components of social existence. The functionalists see it as the instrument for social order. The organizational approach sees it as an apparatus of government, and the international approach sees it as what? As a unit, an actor within the international system. And like we said, we want to discuss state actors and non-state actors. So when we talk about states, yes, a state is a country. A state is a country, but what does that imply? So a state is a society that is divided, according to Lasky, he said a state is a society divided into government and subjects, claiming within its allocated physical area supremacy over other institutions. For them, they believe that is what a state is. It claims supremacy over every other institution. He would also define a state as what? He said a state is a collection of institutions or a territorial unit or a philosophical idea with an instrument of coercion. And then Weber define a state as what? A regime or supreme authority which gives order. All this for me are just jargons, right? They are all jargons. In simple terms, when we define a state, in simple terms, just away from this definition we have, in simple terms, we said a state is a unit that has territory, that has people, government, and sovereignty. That's what a state is. In simple terms, we said a state is a political unit or a social unit that has territory, population, government, and sovereignty. That is what it implies. So according to the Montevideo Convention on Rights and Duties of a State, they said that for a state to be referred to as a state, it must have territory. So we said a state is a political unit that has territory, people, a government that is sovereign. That's what a state is. So they say for a state to be referred to as a state, it must have a territory. That's one. It must have a territory. It must also have population, right? It must have population. It must have a government which is legitimate, a government that is recognized by all. And then it must have what we refer to as what? Sovereignty, what we just explained now. It must have sovereignty.
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but on this screen is an effective government with legitimacy, and like there are some governments that are corrupt, and just wanted to ask how this interferes with being an effective government, because a corrupt government isn't legit, is it?
A corrupt government is still a government as long as it's recognized by the law. That's how we started with the discourse on authority, and we said we discussed legal rational authority, right?
Yeah.
Good. So you see, the fact that that government has been recognized by the law, right? It is legitimate. The government may be corrupt, but it is legitimate. So it is now up to the citizens to do what? To out the government when maybe through election or through what is recognized, through what the constitution of that particular society recognize as a way to remove a government that is corrupt, right? You can do that through, through impeachment. Oh, you're about to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just said for myself, like as long as it fulfills the basic needs of being a government, it's a government, no matter whether it's corrupt or not. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
The fact that the government is corrupt is another discussion. It's another discussion entirely. You get the idea. As long as there is a government in place, right? And I like where you are coming from. As long as there's a government in place, and that government is recognized by the constitution of the land, that government is recognized as what? As legitimate. But you see, if that government is corrupt, the people can do what? They can impeach that particular government. There's a process of recall, right?
Yeah, I understand. I got it.
So there's a process of recall. So that's one attribute of a state. So when you have a society where there's no government, can you refer to that as a government, as a state? It's no longer a state. Are we together? All these attributes must be present for us to refer to it as a state. It must have sovereignty. Are you getting me? And it must have the capacity to enter relations with other states. Then you can say that is a state. So you see, going back to the definition in which we initially had, right? As a state being a society with government that is legitimate, right? Can we say that a society that has a government is a state? Can we say Scotland? Because Scotland now has a territory, right? Are we together?
Yes.
Scotland has a territory.
Yes.
It has people in it. It has a government, but it does not have sovereignty. Are you getting the idea?
Yes.
So by that count, we cannot refer to it as what? As a state. Am I making sense? Are you getting me?
Yeah.
So we said it must have territory. It must be, when we imply that a state must have territory, it must be located somewhere in the world, right? There is no hardline rule on the vastness of that territory, right? It may be a small territory, it may be large territory, it must be as vast as the United States, it may, or better still, it may be as vast as Canada, right? Or it must be as small as let's say one of the island nations, right? It must be as small as whatever, but it must have a territory. It must have population. The population may be as much as China with 1.3 billion people, or it must be as small as a country like the Vatican City with less than 500,000 people, but it must have a population. It must have government, either corrupt or not, but it must have government. It must have sovereignty. That's the ability to enter into, to make decisions on its own without the interference of anybody. And it must be able to enter into relations with other states. So these are the features of a state. So when you look at a particular space that does not have this, once any of this is missing, then that is no longer a state. Are you getting me? Once any of this is missing, it is not a state. So please take note of that. And there are theoretical approach to states, right? Quickly, we want to look at this theoretical approach, the realist approach, the liberalist approach, and the critical theorist approach to a state. When we talk about the realist approach to a state, the realist theory, they consider the states within the international system as the only recognized actor within the international system. They believe that the state is unitary and a coherent actor of the international system. What does that imply? They believe that it is only the state that is in existence in the international system. Everybody must relate from the premise of the state. And then they argue that state behavior is determined by a single motive. And that motive is what? Survival. I'll be explaining what this implies by next week. I'll be explaining state behavior when we talk about the realist theory next week. But please get this, that they believe that the national interest of the states is the guiding principle of every state. So everybody acts within the international system based on its what? On its national interest. So state behavior is guided by what? By its national interest. Please, first they say the state is the only actor in the international system. Second, they say state behavior is guided by what? Its national interest. And then they say regardless of the domestic makeup of the states, state leaders speak and act on behalf of what? Of their respective states. So the state leaders are the ones that act on behalf of the state. So the presidents and the ministers and the the prime ministers and the likes of each state speak on behalf of the states. So nobody speaks on behalf of the state except the leaders of that particular state. So this is the argument of the realists, and that is how they see a state. This is their notion of a state, this principle in which we have. And then we have the liberalists. The liberalists believe that states arise out of the needs of the society. It goes back to, quickly, let me go back to this slide. The first one, the idealist approach, right? They believe that the liberalists are within the premise of the idealist approach, right? That's the believing that the state is a component, one of the components of social existence, which is the movement from the family to the society and to the state. So that's the argument of the liberalists. They believe that states arise out of the need of the society. And what's the need of the society? And state reflects the interests of individual citizens in the society. I briefly mentioned the premise of social contracts. And what do we mean by that? The argument of liberalists is to say that before now, there's what we refer to as the state of nature, right? There's anarchy in the society. everybody was just living on his own. There's no law in the society. Everybody was just on his own. Everybody was doing anything they want to do and the likes, right? You know, when there's anarchy, where there's no law and order, there is going to be rancor, right? People, you can do whatever you want to do. There is no orderliness in the society. So the liberals believe that the state came out of that confusion, where there's no orderliness in the society. So people now came together. They came together and said, guys, let's come together. Let's come up with rules and regulations for ourselves. Let's say this is what we can do. Let's come up with rules. That's how the social contract comes to play. That's how the states came to be. People now say, please come, let's discuss. Let's come up with rules and regulations for ourselves. And then they came up with rules and regulations for themselves. And then they said, okay, let us have a government. And let us say the government now can protect us. While the government is protecting us, we will also have something we have to do for the government. That's now we now start having issues, what we refer to as rights and responsibilities. So we now say, okay, let's have responsibilities. Let's say everybody must do this, and this. These are the rules. These are our responsibility. And then when we do this, and this, then we have rights. We can demand from this government this, and this. So we say A, B, C, and D is what we are going to do. Then C, B, A, and B is what the government is going to do for us. Are you getting the idea? So we have 5, let's assume now we have 5 rules, 5 responsibility that we're expecting to do as citizens, and then we have 5 rights that we're expecting to enjoy from the citizens. So that's the liberal perspective, or the perspective, or the approach the liberals look at the state from. So they believe that the state emerged out of the needs of the people, and then the state operates on the premise of social contract. For instance, now, we expect the state to provide certain needs. For instance, provide electricity, provide water, provide our basic amenities, provide good roads and the likes, right? And in some instances, even provide education and the likes, right? If a state does not perform these things, we say that the government are not performing. We want to take them out. We now say that the government is corrupt. The government is this and the government is that. It is based on our social contract with the states. And we, to our citizens, are also supposed to do what? To perform our own side of the bargain, which is what? Pay our taxes and do some things in which we are supposed to do. So basically, that's the argument around the liberals. And then they said that the core role of the state is to ensure order. So for them, the state is just an umpire to ensure order in the society. Like I said, the liberals believe that during the state of nature, in the pre-state system, there was disorderliness. Now the state is now the umpire that provides order within the society, right? And they also believe that within the international system, the state is not the only actor. They believe that we have both state actors and we also have non-state actors, individuals that operate within the international system. So you have people that can influence the international system. People act within the international system. You have individuals that play different roles within the international system, not just state alone. So please take note. The realists believe that only the states, the countries that act within the international system, while the liberals said, no, we have the states, yes, but we have also other people that act within the international system. So basically, these are the roles. These are the perception of the liberalists. And then we have the critical theories. The critical theory rejects both the argument of the realists and the liberalists as relating to the notion of the states. The Marxists, for instance, the Marxists, the Karl Marx and V.I. Lenin and the likes, they believe that the states is just a reflection of the class system, right? I suppose you must have heard about the Marxists before. For Marx, Karl Marx and the Marxists, they believe that the state is an instrument by the elites. It's an instrument of the elites, the instrument of continuous oppression of the masses by the elites. That is what they believe the state is, right? And then the social constructivities, they believe that the state itself, the identity of the state is shaped by historical and sociological factors. First and foremost, the social constructivities believe that everything is constructed, the society is constructed, that there's no objective reality. Everything is constructed over time. What we believe, what we are now was constructed. It's based on everyday living. So they believe that the state and the shape of the state is constructed by what is historical and sociological reality. And then we have the feminist theory that believe that the state is just ambivalent as it is. And for the feminist theory, we have first the liberal feminists that believe that the state can be reformed from within. They believe that you can reform the state from within by increasing female representation, right? You know, the feminist argument is to say that we need to decline on the premises of masculinity of the society and increase the role of women in the society, increase the role of the women, increase the political, economic, and social rights of women as it is. And for the liberal feminists, they believe that there can be a change within the society if the role of women are increased in the society. And then we have the radical feminists that believe that the state is intrinsically a patriarchal character. For the argument is that the state is more or less a reflection of patrimony, a reflection of male dominance. That's what they believe. That's what the feminists believe that the state is like. But the liberal feminists believe that yes, the state may have a projection of manliness as it is, but it can be reduced. There can be an increasing role of women within the society. So basically that's that. So summarily, we said the state must be sovereign. There must be an exercise of absolute and unrestricted power. We said the states decisions are public, they are collective decision making. And then we said the state is what? It's an exercise in legitimation. It's seen as binding on what? On all citizens. State is an exercise in legitimation. It's binding on all citizens. As long as we are within the territory of that state, then the state has authority over you. And then we said the state is an instrument of domination, right? It's backed up by the law that can be enforced by the state. It has the instrument of coercion, right? It has the military and the police under it and the likes. And then we said the state is what? It's a territorial association. It has a it's geographically designed, right? The state must be found somewhere. Like we have here, you see, the state is geographically designed. You can find different states in different places. From the picture we are seeing here, you can see Canada up there. You can see the United States. You can see Brazil. You can see Argentina. You can see countries in Africa. You can see Nigeria. You can see South Africa. You can see Egypt. You can see countries in Europe, right? You can see France. You can see Germany. You can see the United Kingdom. You can see Sweden. You can see Portugal. You can see Russia, how vast it looks. You can see China. You can see Australia, and all like that. You see, the state itself has a particular geographical setting in which it is found. And that is a fundamental attribute of the state, right? Territoriality. It must be noted in a particular territory. So yeah, and then we said a state is what? An actor in the war stage, right? So in that discourse on a state, you should be able to, there's a difference between a state and the government. The state is permanent, the government is not. The government is continuous. So government changes over time, right? Government changes over time, the state remains permanent. While the state is an organized political community, government is a system. It's a system by which the state is controlled. The state is an organized political community, while the government is a system that controls the state. Government is just a machinery of the state. So these are some of the things in which you should are supposed to be familiar with. The government controls a particular state, whereby the state empowers that the government itself. So in summary, we can say that the state is permanent and the government is not. The state is a legal and political authority, and on and on. And then again, we should also have a difference between the state as well as the nation, right? A state is independent political unit that is found within a particular territory and has sovereignty, whereby a nation is just a group of people that share same culture, same language, tradition, and history. So quickly, let me ask you, what is the obvious difference between a nation and a state? What is the obvious difference between a nation and a state? Because here we said that a nation has a population, a nation has all what a state has. We said a nation is a population that shares the same culture, same language, history, and tradition. So what is the obvious difference between a state and a nation?
Nation can be divided by borders.
A state can also be divided by borders.
Nations.
Yes, a nation can be divided by borders. A nation has border. And I'm saying that a state also has borders.
I mean, a state is a territory and a nation is not.
Nation also has territory. A nation is located somewhere.
What? Okay.
Well, a nation, let me put it for you, like your border and territory arguments now. A nation is made up of people that shares the same language, territory, and same language, tradition, and history. They are located somewhere. Are you getting me?
Yeah.
So they have territory. You can actually identify them within a particular territory, and they have border. For instance, now we can say the Scotland is a nation. I'm giving you a clue now. Scotland is a nation. It is made up of people, right? They share the same culture, right? They share the same tradition and history, right? But why would we not refer to them as a state?
Because they don't have sovereignty.
Because they don't have sovereignty. That is the answer. Because they don't have sovereignty. Both nation and states share the same attributes. They have territory, they have governments, right? They have population, but one doesn't have sovereignty. Another example in Europe that you can relate to is the saga that is happening in Catalonia. Is it Catalonia and Spain?
Yeah.
Is it Catalan, right? And Spain. Yeah, so you see the Catalonians now, they are what? They are a nation, but they are not a state. Are you getting it?
Yes.
Yes.
So you see, they are a nation, but they are not a state. They are a group of people that share the same culture, language, and history, but they don't have what? They don't have sovereignty. So what they are pushing for is what? Sovereignty. So you see, when they are trying to do all the whole referendum and the likes and all those things, they are pushing to be referred to as what? As a state. they want to be recognized by other countries in the world, right? They want to be recognized by them. They want to also have their own representation. They want to be sovereign. That is what it implies. So please take note of this. So you see, you can have a group of people within a particular setting that have all these things, but they don't have what? Sovereignty. So until they have sovereignty, the ability to influence, to decide affairs by themselves without the interference of others, then we say they become a state. Are we together? So okay, so let's continue quickly. This is the last thing we are going to look at: the obligations and duties of a state within the international system. The obligations and duties of a state. Like I said, there are duties, there are rights as well as responsibilities. So I'm just going to scan through all this, and you get to just look at it. So when we talk about the duties of a state within the international system, there are certain duties that is expected within the United Nations charters. So basically, they are divided into 3 categories. So first, we have the obligation that relates to the protection of the international legal order, right? The protection of the international legal order. So under this, it is the obligation of the states. It is one of the oldest principles of international law, right? That every state must conduct itself according to the law, according to the international law. For us to have peace, I talk about anarchy, right? I said the international system, everybody, the international system is anarchic in the sense that there is no government, there's no world government, everybody is sovereign, everybody has the ability to decide whatever he wants to do. So if you have a situation whereby every state is sovereign, what we are going to be having is anarchy, right? So the obligations and duties of a state within the international system, the first obligation, right, is what? They to conduct themselves according to international law. So every state must try to settle, and the point is that every state must also try to settle disputes by peaceful means. This is an obligation within the international system. Every state must try to settle itself by what? By peaceful means, using peaceful means. You are not supposed to go to war. War is supposed to be the last option of a state. So we are all supposed to operate within what? Within international law. I think in week 4 or week 5, we are going to be discussing international law. So first, the obligation is what? To protect the legal order. That's the first obligation of the state, to protect the legal order. And how do we protect the legal order, international legal order? To ensure that everybody conducts its affairs according to international law, and disputes are resolved by peaceful means. The second obligation of a state is the protection of others. Every state within the international system is concerned about the protection of other states. The principle of all for one and one for all. We must protect ourselves. You see these skydivers now, what they are doing. This picture depicts what the international system is, how it's supposed to operate. That's the obligation of the state. People are not supposed to be scattered and just be on their own. There has to be a protection. Everybody is holding on to the other. We are all interconnected. We are connected one way or the other. You are holding up here, I'm holding up here. Everybody is holding up as it is. So this is an operation, the protection of other states. But again, there's what we refer to as non-interference in the internal affairs of each state. We are not supposed to interfere in the internal affairs of each state. Each state also has a duty to prevent each state also has a duty to prevent the use of its territory for hostile activity against other states. So you cannot, a state must ensure that its territory is not used to attack another. That's what it implies. So you must protect the others. right? And then states has a duty to prevent activities in their territory that can pollute that of others. That's where we have, that's another point we need to also consider. You must not do things within yourself and say, okay, because it's your territory, then you do things that can have harmful effects on others. That's why we talk about the issue of climate change, for instance, and the issue of emission of greenhouse gases. And we are saying, because everybody can say, I'm emitting greenhouse gases in my territory, so why do you have to bother about others? But no, we need to protect others, because you know that the more greenhouse gas emission you emit, that's if you are a climate change believer, you know that it has an effect on the world itself. It has an effect on the world itself. The world becomes hotter, and then a whole lot of countries will go into extinction as a result of the climate changes. Disasters increases in other places of the world and all that. So you see, you need to ensure that the activities that are carried out within your territory does not affect others, right? So that's another obligation. That's the second obligation of the state. First obligation is order, to ensure that international order. Second obligation is to protect others, responsibility to protect. And then the third obligation is what? Obligations of the United Nations Charter, right? The obligations of the United Nations Charter here is what? To refrain from giving assistance to any state to which the United Nations is taking action against. So if there's a sanction that has been carried out by the United Nations on any particular state, every other state has the responsibility to ensure that that sanction is enforced. So that is what it implies. That must be carried out by each state. So these are the three obligations of the states within the international system. First, the most important is what? The protection of international order, to ensure order in the international system. Second is to protect others. Third is what? To ensure the protection of the protection of the United Nations Charter. So basically, these are the points in which we want to look at today. And I'll open up the floor if there are questions for me, and then we move on from that. Any question?
Yeah, with the UN Charter, a lot of countries don't protect the Charter. They don't respect human rights, but they are still in the UN.
Yes, that is quite interesting. That's a point you need to look at. And I suspect you are going to raise, I was expecting that somebody should raise that. And that's why I was looking for this slide, was for me to show you this slide. And I will explain that. Look at the second point we raised in the realist theory, right? Can somebody read that for me?
State behavior is determined by a single motive, the wish to survive, national interest.
National interest. You see, every state operates within this premise of its national interest, right? So sometimes you have these laws, right, in place for each state to imbibe, to go by. But some states will not go by this law because it is not in their interest to do it. All together. Because it's not in their interest to do it, they don't do it. So for instance, you talk about the issue of human rights violations. At that point, that particular government or that particular state that is violating human rights, it is a fundamental charter of the United Nations, the 1948 Human Rights Charter, the 1948 UN Charter, that says states must respect the dignity of man. But when it is not in their interest to do that, what do? They discard the charter. Are you getting the idea? Right? They discard it. It goes back to the discourse when we talk about anarchy, to say that because there is no enforceability of the United Nations Charter, right? Because there's no world police, there's no particular, there's no police in the world that enforce these rules. It becomes difficult sometimes to enforce all the rules within the international system, even the UN Charter. That's why the best they will do to countries that do not obey human rights is to impose sanctions on them. Are you getting me? They impose sanctions on them. But sometimes these sanctions are also not effective because, like we said, each state is supposed to help enforce this by following the obligations of the United Nations, right? So if there's a sanction on a particular country for not obeying the rules of the United Nations, every other state is supposed to assist in ensuring that that sanction is effective. But you see, interest comes to play. I'll give you a perfect example now, and I will discuss this further when we talk about interest next week when we're discussing realist perspective. But take this now. In this class, if you have a friend in this class, right, we impose a particular sanction on that friend. Let's say that we evict somebody in this class. We say, don't come to class again, right? And the sanction is supposed to be effective. We say, okay, don't come to class. It is possible that one of us in this class, because that person is your friend, what will you do? Ideally, what we are supposed to do is that if we put a sanction on somebody in this class and say, don't come to class, nobody in this class is supposed to share the materials or anything we discuss in this class with that particular person. Am I correct? Are you with me, guys?
Yes.
Are you getting my analogy?
Yes.
If we evict somebody from this class, the reason why we're evicting the person from this class is to say that the person is not supposed to share in the materials of this class, right? The person is not supposed to know what we discuss in this class, right?
Yeah, but then
But it is possible that because that person is your friend, are you going to do ideally? Because the person is your friend, what do you think will happen? Or what will you do if the person is your friend?
Share the material anyway.
You will share the material with the person. You see, that is what also happened within the international system, right? When there is sanction imposed on different countries of the world, people go behind, other countries go behind, and still operate outside that particular sanction, making the sanction not effective. Are you getting the idea? The sanction becomes not effective because the idea, for instance, let's go back to the example, the analogy we're giving now. The reason why we are evicting somebody in this class for not going by the rules of the class, we are hoping that by evicting the person will not get access to those things that we have in the class. But someone else will go and share those rules. If you look at practical example, for instance, look at Syria. The war in Syria. The war in Syria has been continuous for over 10 years now. Why? Because Syria is supported by Russia, right? Why the United States is supporting another camp? It's not supporting the government. You get the idea? So you see, we are not in agreement in what we need to do within the international system. And that itself is one of the disadvantage or one of the downside of the international system as it is, right? These obligations are there, these responsibilities are there, but putting them into practice is it's a voluntary action. We're supposed to do it collectively. It's supposed to be an agreement which everybody's supposed to come up with. But in most cases, people don't. States don't. So yeah, that's the challenge in which we have, and the challenge in we have to contend with within the international system. I hope you get that. Have I been able to explain that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other question?
Not
Any other question? Yeah, please go ahead.
No further question.
No further question. Okay. So if there are no further questions, I guess we will have to end the class here. and reconvene next week. Okay, thank you very much. I will see you next week.
Bye.
All right. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.